What's up, my know-it-alls? Well, this is our first completed Spawn storyline, written by Todd McFarlane himself. It's titled Questions, and it covers Spawn issues 1 through 4. Now, unlike many of his contemporaries, Todd McFarlane was looking to do something bigger than just spin a monthly comic yarn. He had something to say, and we're actually going to be shifting into just what that is, but it all began with these 4 issues. Spawn number 1 takes place in the city of New York, of course, and it's 1992. So the story is of the titular character. He wakes up some years after his corporeal or physical body had died. With few memories, we see Spawn, he sort of struggles to recall things after returning. Returning from where? Oh, that's what we wanted to find out. So he catches fleeting glimmers of the life he left behind, but nothing he can really fully wrap his mind around yet. So McFarlane does some trope-filled storytelling by giving us an exposition dump as told through the eyes of television reporters, commentators, and personalities. The reports we see are based in 1987 and focus on the death of the American military operative. His name's Al Simmons. He's a decorated veteran who saved the president's life once, mostly through the speculation surrounding Al's wife, Wanda, at the funeral. That has to do with her being seen with an unusual man. So again, there's some people are thinking things and whatnot. All this storytelling is eventually going to end up somewhere. So Spawn recalls being part of the CIA, specifically Jason Wynn and his death. He wanted to return to someone he loved. When he sees a vision of his wife, he recalls making a deal with a demon to return. Now, later on, we find out this demon is known as the mrknowitall, and essentially is one of the various Dukes of Hell. But that's how deep this story goes later. So he curses the demon as it was his terms, and now he can't recall his past life. So Spawn feels like his new power surging through him. He decides to go find his wife. Now, once he gets some answers, he'll track down the demon who screwed him on the deal. At a crime scene, meanwhile, elsewhere, as comic books will do, you see Sam Burke asks another character named Twitch Williams about a mobster's murder. Twitch explained several times to Burke that while he was thrown through a window, he died of his heart being removed from his chest. Now, this is the first of these kinds of things, and ultimately it was removed from his chest and shoved into his mouth. It's awesome. So Burke shows a little remorse as several other major crime syndicate members had been killed recently in a very similar fashion, so clearly we now have some sort of a serial killer. Nearby on a rooftop, Spawn spots several men who are sexually assaulting a woman. He easily disposes of them, like super easy. The guy's not a slouch. He uses a little bit of his energy and essentially blows them up. But somehow using the power does something, and it sort of makes him experience a flashback way stronger than the first ones. And he feels like he's got to find this woman, who he now begins to identify as Wanda. Upon returning to his senses, he finds that he's weeping in the arms of this woman who he just got finished saving. And then we skip to some news reporters it's now 1992, so they're up to date. And the news of the day is about a 4th gangland murder. There's also reports of someone who spotted this vigilante or this whatever. They think he might be Youngblood, whatever. It's Spawn, obviously. Spoilers. So then we continue on the story, and the Spawn kind of is wandering through the streets. He kind of angrily pulls off his mask, and he notices, he's like, oh my God, my hands feel rough, and my face isn't, what's going on? And he's like, oh, what am I? And he's upset. He's like, I don't know what's going on here. So then we cut back to the police officers, kind of Twitch and Sam, who, these two characters are going to become real familiar as time goes on, but they can't believe the physical damage that Spawn caused several of the gang members with this, what we later on know to be necroplasm, which is just a real fancy way of saying a big green bomb. Anyway, elsewhere, this demon that we knew about, what we now know as the mrknowitall, watches over Simmons, and he says out loud to himself that he will have so many more problems coming his way as he breaks into a maniacal laugh. That's the mrknowitall. It's all ha 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 to the moon. Spawn number 2 is literally, it's Questions Part 2, which is the sequel, the second part. And it opens up with a character who calls himself the Violator. He's kind of talking to a cat. He's talking about how, you know, it's all this stuff is, he's heartbroken and whatnot, and ultimately getting very much enamored with this cat. And he's essentially talking about how he's going to have to go and hurt Spawn. So let me see Spawn, finally, big full page. And he actually calls him this, which is interesting. So even though later on, there's a distinction that's being made later on by Todd tries to make, which is that all Hellspawn are like Al Simmons. Or like Spawn, who, by the way, is Al Simmons. Big spoilers. And so, but then he calls him Spawn like a proper noun. I don't know what that means. Spawn's on top of this church, standing over here by a cross. I think it's symbolic of something. Not really sure what yet. And he's thinking and reminiscing. He's trying to remember. He's like, I died 5 years ago. I don't know what's going on. He's really trying hard. So in the next few pages, there's literally just a series of very stylized panels as he's talking to himself. Again, exposition dump of thought. Now, we've seen the same kind of thing before in Marvel Comics with like Spider-Man and whatnot. But as he's having this exposition dump, he gets to a point where he's trying to kind of talk to himself, and there's somebody trying to get his attention. It's this clown on the roof. It's the same clown we know to be the guy who calls himself the Violator. We skip ahead to a place called Dawn Corp. In this place, there's a mob guy who's essentially having his heart ripped out by a very rough-looking demonic thing. So now we get the answer to the question, who's ripping out people's hearts? And so this security guard guy runs in, and the guy's like, you know, your boss is unavailable. And he's like, but he did say he wanted you to join him. Blah, his blood. And then we get a full-page view of this demon with a horn coming out of his back and 2 horns in the front and arms that are all weird shaped. Very, very like, hey, if demons can look like anything, why not look like this? So that's what this guy is. Then we get our second view of another news exposition dump. This is really where Todd started to kind of fall apart. The story is wonderful. The story does not fall apart. How he tells it does, because you keep butting into these, you know, moments that stop you, and you're like, oh, well, I guess we have to. All right, fine. I got to tell you guys more stuff, and you got all this background stuff. So again, but then we come back to Spawn on another church rooftop. This time, he comes up with a clever idea to use his powers to restore his body. He's like, shoot, I'll just fix myself. So he's like, oh man, I feel good. What a jolt. This and that. He looks at his hands. He's Caucasian. He's a white guy. Clearly, Spawn remembers himself, and he says, he even says it. Now he goes, this can't be. I'm a black man. I don't know if this page is problematic or not. I love it. I'm here for it. Whatever. But yeah, that was kind of interesting. And you get to see Twitch again and his partner, and the two of them are kind of talking over what's going on. I don't know why we came back to them. I think this was just used kind of as a transition to take us from Spawn having his realization. We see these two guys, and then we go back to Violator again. This time he's killing some guy who is playing a piano and whatnot. And we come back yet again. So again, page after page, I think he's going for a feel of like a movie, like cinematic storytelling, how you go from one scene to the next to the next. And this time there's a big rush of energy, and he's trying super hard and nothing's working. So he kind of restores himself back to his normal, not restored self. Because he's like, I'm not going to live as a white guy. I just want to talk to my wife. That's around the time he gets another flashback. And he sees Jason Wynn again. And this time you come to find out that Al had begun to learn that Jason Wynn was dirty. And as a result of this, he'd become kind of a bully and whatnot, and he was convinced the only thought made him angrier, and ultimately he didn't really care about anybody other than just making some money or whatever else and hurting people. And that's where this flashback ends. Spawn falls, crashes down to the alleyway floor, and this time we see the same numbers with the little Spawn logo instead of an hourglass. And the numbers are now much lower. They've gone from 9995 to 9432. Again, we don't necessarily know if that's hours, years, minutes, days, or some combination thereof, but it's definitely gone down significantly, which just goes to show you how much he was throwing his energy around. That's what that big splash page of all that power, energy, and stuff happening. So then again, we're back to the Violator. This time he's ripping out more people's hearts, and essentially that's when we come back to the alley. and we see it's a classic Todd McFarlane 4-up panel with, of course, the Spawn logo in dead center. And we get to see that this clown guy is talking to him and essentially threatens Spawn. Tells him he's going to turn, I could take your spine out and use it as a whip and blah, 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 and play basketball with your spleen and the whole 9 yards. Snap your bones like brittle twigs and the whole bit. Ultimately, and then there's a weird, his zipper was down joke. I don't know. But Spawn's like, look, I don't got time for this. He turns his back on him, and literally you get this really corny but effective line where you get to see that the clown dude has transformed into that heart-ripping out demon guy. And of course he ends with, have a heart. And there you go. Now you know. And if knowing's half the battle, you're halfway to being a know-it-all. Hopefully you know you got a little more knowledge, you know a little bit more about Spawn number 2. What's up, my know-it-alls? We're celebrating 30 years of Image Comics with everything from my pull list that brings us to the second book I was reading back in August of 1992, Spawn number 3. It starts with a full-page close-up of Spawn himself as he suddenly recalls his ex-wife's name is Wanda Blake. He decides to head to the headquarters of the CIA, that's his former employers. He's going to dig up Wanda's file in order to track her down. He thinks about how he used to think it's an invasion of privacy, but now he just wants his old life back. His memories are slowly returning to him, and he knows the devil's playing with him. He knows there are many unanswered questions he needs to solve, like who the clown was he met in the alley. Elsewhere, the mrknowitall laughs as he watches from his throne. He continues his plot to expand his army and use Spawn to aid in gathering the requisite soldiers. He's glad he sent several other followers to check in on him, as no one from hell truly trusts each other. Meanwhile, Sam and Twitch, the officers we've met before, are poring over the casework that's been piling up with the mob heart surgeon killings. Outside, Violator prowls the alleys, singing songs to himself about murder. At CIA headquarters, Spawn breaks in to find Billy Miller sexually harassing his secretary, Linda, who's already married. Spawn picks him up by the throat and warns him to keep it in his pants. He then takes the file on Wanda Blake and retreats into the night. mrknowitall laughs as Spawn uses violence, which he loves and yearns for. On the rooftop, Spawn reads, "She had started a fund in his name," and maps the information to her current location. This is where the big guy realizes something is off. He can't figure out why she would move until further in the file, he finds out Wanda is remarried. Outside of Wanda's house, Spawn uses his necroplasm energy to transform into a white guy yet again. He rings the doorbell and is beside himself with how beautiful she is. When a small child named Cyan comes to the door, he faints. Upon waking up, he finds out Wanda has married Terry Fitzgerald, and together they had Cyan. He's belittled as he could not have children with Wanda and now understands the devil's playing with him. He's showing him that his wife has moved on, remarried, and had children. Spawn leaves wishing her happiness. In a nearby alley, Spawn's spell wears off and he loses his mind, raging against the devil, as the clown walks up and threatens him again. This time, he transforms into his true form of the Violator right in front of him. Slightly surprised, Violator takes advantage of Spawn's distraction and quickly plunges his hand into his chest, ripping out his heart. Spawn collapses on the ground, dead. Violator struts away, shocked that mrknowitall's favorite human is already dead. Violator hears, "Who said anything about being human?" from behind him, and turns. Don't ask me why that was Batman's voice, by the way. I don't know. Sorry. But he turns around and to see Spawn rejuvenated, and he's got green necroplasm that's kind of healing his heart wound. Last issue, Violator showed up ready to whoop Spawn's butt and ripped out his heart, only to have the biggest cape in the business get up, and believe me, Spawn was not happy. We come to Spawn number 4, and it starts exactly where we left off, with Spawn facing Violator in the alley. That is when all hell literally breaks loose. Seriously, this entire issue is basically one giant wall-to-wall fight, and I'm definitely here for it. So, let's get into it. Violator and Spawn, they engage in a brutal showdown. Violator ripping his heart out each time. Spawn regenerates it. Again and again, they do this dance. Finally, in a massive assault, Spawn puts a huge hole in Violator's side. Now, the real fight starts then, with the two of them realizing they can't vaporize one another, so they both try it the old-fashioned way, by tearing each other apart limb from limb. Violator is surprised Spawn's more powerful and claims he was supposed to be the stronger one. mrknowitall intervenes finally, explaining to them that they're both his minions in his little battle against heaven. Their goal is to cause man to do wrong, and Spawn will stop and kill them while doing so, locking them all on mrknowitall's side. He claims that heaven is strong, but they won't be able to create the numbers that he can. mrknowitall even shows mercy and restores Spawn's lost arm, costing him no necroplasm. He then punishes Violator for his unscheduled killing spree, because apparently that influenced the crime lords to slow down their evil ways. He locks him in his clown form, effectively grounding him. Now there's a brief interlude where Spawn encounters some kids running up to him when really they're checking out the Savage Dragon who's on the TV screens in the electronics store. Because there used to be televisions in electronic stores, kids. If I'm not mistaken, this is reprinted from Image Comics number 0 or some other special edition at the time. I'm sure someone's going to correct me in the comment section. At the Fitzgerald household, Wanda Blake wakes up with a nightmare that Al was reaching out to her for help, but had changed somehow. Now, Terry Fitzgerald lovingly supports her and feels she doesn't have to hide that she can't forget about Al. Well, there you go. Now you know. And if knowing is half the battle, you are on your way to being a know-it-all yourself. Be sure to like this video, and if you enjoy the content I'm creating, subscribe and hit the bell icon to be notified when new content drops on the channel. Always remember, everyone loves a know-it-all.